Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
My name is Richard Hamrick. I'm a junior here at St. Christopher's. And tonight, I'd like to discuss something that I think I know a pretty good deal about. As a student, as an athlete, but especially as a teenager whose parents have very high expectations of them. And that is failure. Now, when someone says the word failure, something probably pops into your head. A picture, an image, a definition. For me, it was always getting a big, fat, red F back on a test. Like that one behind us. But for you, it might be something different. Now, obviously, failure isn't a good thing. It's not something that should be strived for. But failure is very important in life. In fact, learning how to deal with and overcome failure is ironically an integral part of success, which is kind of weird because if you think about it, they're opposites. In fact, I believe that success isn't only defined by our triumph in life and by our victories, what we do well. Success is also how well we respond to and recover from failure. If you set out to go and accomplish something, and then personally invest yourself 100% in whatever you're doing, and you end up not accomplishing your goal, that's not total failure. Failure is not responding to that missed goal, or not improving in some way following that shortcoming. Success is reacting and bettering yourself based on the outcome of that experience. Everyone fails at some point or another, but those who are truly successful are especially adept at responding to their situation and reacting to improve their outcome. In short, those who are successful in life fail well. They take whatever failure they encounter and salvage every bit of success that they can. And tonight, I'd like to share with you a personal experience that I think illustrates this point pretty well. This past summer, I had an incredible opportunity to take a trip out to California and make an attempt to climb Mount Shasta. Now, Mount Shasta stands 14,179 feet tall, making it in the top 25 tallest mountains in the continental United States. Now, when I first signed up for this trip, I didn't quite realize how tall 14,179 feet was. I mean, that's kind of a number. It's sort of difficult to put that in perspective. So one rainy Saturday, I kind of got a wake-up call about this. I was on my couch, watching TV, eating potato chips, and I got a bit of a wake-up call. I was channel surfing, and I flipped past this show on the Discovery Channel about people who build cabins in the middle of nowhere. So I stopped for a moment, and on the TV screen, there was a beautiful cabin, that one right there, with a big mountain in the background. And so I thought to myself, wow, this must be like Everest or Kilimanjaro or some, like enormously big mountain that people dream of climbing. And then I started listening to the narrator, and he was talking about the beautiful Mount Shasta in the California Valley. And so I was like, well, great, here, I'm on my couch, I'm eating Doritos, and I have to climb this thing like a month. And my newfound fear wasn't really helped a whole lot when this was the next picture that they showed. So that, of course, just made me even more nervous. So at this point, I realized if I was going to invest in myself and really make a good attempt to climb this mountain, I was going to have to start training. So I started lifting weights and more. I started running after night after school. And I even started climbing stairs, or running stairs, because somebody told me that was a good way to train. And after about a month, I felt pretty ready. So in June, I flew out to San Francisco, where I met up with the rest of the group. And after spending several days backpacking around Yosemite and just getting to know everybody, we began the process of climbing Mount Shasta. Now, the most common way to go about climbing Mount Shasta is to do it in several segments. So when we arrived at the base of the mountain, we began in an area known as the Bunny Flats, which you can see sort of right down on the bottom left of your screen. And from Bunny Flats, it takes about 2.5 hours to hike to Horse Camp, which is the main base of the mountain. Once we hiked up to Horse Camp, that afternoon we trained for a while in the snow. We learned how to deal with snow slides, or how to properly manage energy, how to navigate the road teams. And we went to bed at 6 o'clock after a hearty dinner of mac and cheese. Gotta get a lot of carbs in. And the best way to summit a mountain like this is to wake up at 12 so that you can climb all night, all morning. And if you're really lucky, you'll get to the mountain at like 11:30 to 12 the following day. So it's a big process. So at 12 o'clock, we woke up, we ate a Cliff Bar, and we began the hike from this cabin. And that's a picture of us right before we set out. So the first 3 hours of the hike were on a snow dirt-packed trail, and we felt very good about it. And eventually we reached an area known as Lake Helen. Now what's interesting about Lake Helen is it's sort of the last flat point on the mountain. After that, it's essentially a 40-degree slope up for 2,000 feet, and then you have to traverse a ridge known as the Red Banks, which is sort of at the top of the slope, and then you have to go up a false peak called Misery Hill, which is appropriately named, and then you arrive at the summit. So after about 4 hours after Lake Helen, we ended up reaching up near the red banks. And at this point, we were exhausted, our legs were cramping, but you know, we felt pretty good. I mean, we were excited. And that only lasted so far as when our radio guide's radio started to squawk. And we couldn't really hear it in the wind, but eventually we understood what was happening. As we reached the red banks, we had discovered that large sheets of ice, due to the abnormally cold weather on the ridge, had formed on the rock. Now, while this wasn't a huge deal, the big deal was the time of day. Unfortunately, we climbed on a pretty good day, and the sun was out. So had we climbed up over the ice and gone up to the top and come back down, in that time, the ice would have melted. And unfortunately, we didn't have the equipment to deal with the rappel that would have been necessary back down off the ice. So at this point, we sort of looked at each other, and it didn't really dawn on us for a couple minutes later, but we wouldn't be going further. We were kind of done. We failed. Unfortunately, so close to the top, we had to turn back around. We had failed. We wouldn't achieve our goal of summiting. Understandably, the walk back down was a bit quiet, but about an hour later, we began to hear these crackling sounds echoing off the top of the mountain. And a few seconds later, our rope team guide leader, his radio started to squawk again. So we're like, what is it this time? And then all we heard was ice chunk, watch out. And as we turn back up the mountain, looking back up the slope, we see these sort of grapefruit-sized chunks of ice coming down the mountain at us. And what had happened was that the ice that was attached to the red banks had melted, and parts of it had started to break off. So we're faced with sort of these bowling ball-sized chunks of ice coming at us, and we immediately start sort of power walking over to a rock on the other side of the mountain, on the slope, in an attempt to shelter ourselves from this. And eventually we get there and we sort of hunker down, and it takes about 30 to 45 seconds to pass. And we sort of cautiously poke our heads out after this has happened. And we see another group down the mountain, and they're frantically waving at us. We didn't know who they weren't with our group, they were with a different group of climbers. But it was apparent that one man in particular had been hit by one of the ice chunks, and he was sort of rolling around in the snow, and his leg was clearly was hurting him a lot. And as our small group went over to help him, it was very clear that he had a broken bone. Working together with our guide and with members of the other group, we quickly forgot about all disappointment and the failure that we had, and we made a makeshift stretcher out of sort of a backpack and a couple ropes that we had, and tied the man into it. And then we slowly lowered the man down with our makeshift stretcher down the face of the slope in an attempt to get him back to the Lake Helen sort of flat area where we could assess the situation further. Now, meanwhile, while all this is going on, word of the accident and the danger of the ice had spread to all the other rope teams, which had begun to turn around from their various locations and converge on the sort of flat ground that can be seen by looking sort of down the mountain where those that was us, the small group down there. And so we all come back down to Lake Helen, and it's clear that this man won't be able to walk out. So we call a search and rescue team on the satellite phone, and we have a helicopter to come pick the man up. And it was a very interesting experience watching a helicopter land on a mountain, because at one point you're very sort of interested in how this is going to work, and oh, it's so cool, there's a helicopter in the middle of nowhere, like I've never seen that before. But you can't forget that there's a man in great agony who's going to have to undergo surgery, but he made a full recovery, and we got him off the mountain. I only realized the significance of what had occurred that day after I had arrived back home. As I was thinking about what had happened, I couldn't help but wonder, what if? What if we had scaled the mountain that much faster? What if we had trained that much harder? You know, and after thinking about it for a while, after thinking about all these what ifs, I realized there wasn't really anything. I had invested myself fully in accomplishing something, and circumstances beyond our control, like the weather, had prevented us from attaining this goal. In hindsight, this expedition was not a complete failure, despite our inability to make it to the top, and despite the injury of a fellow climber. We didn't fail totally because, in the chaos on the mountain, our team came together to help this poor man, and we formed a lifelong bond that I'll never forget, something that probably actually wouldn't have happened had we made it to the summit. In the midst of failure, we reacted to our misfortune and were able to help a complete stranger, creating success. We took the failure that we encountered and we reacted, salvaging and creating success in the form of both the rescue of this climber and the bond that we still share to this day as friends. And our failure might make for a little bit better of a story. The biggest takeaway I had after this experience was that even if you fail to accomplish a goal, success can still be created by reacting to the obstacles that challenge you. I'd like to leave you with a quote that I think expresses this sentiment pretty well. In a speech to the class of 2011, comedian Conan O'Brien discussed how he dealt with his failures in life. At the Dartmouth commencatory address, he said this: "If you can accept and deal with failure in your life, it can be used as a tool for growth and ultimately as a catalyst for profound reinvention. Failure, when done right, can be an amazing learning experience. The trick is analyzing failure to figure out where you went wrong and immediately use this information to better yourself. Learning how to do this, how to fail well, is one of the most important aspects in leading a productive and positive life. Remember this: the next time that you see that it seems that you might be on the brink of failure, you could just be on the verge of your greatest success." Thank you.